Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abby.
That's me.
That's you.
And you. There was so much intensity. I thought you were going to say something.
Nope.
You like went into deep thought to start this, and I was ready. And then,
Yeah.
guess what?
McDonald's nuggets are not actually made out of real chicken.
Oh,
That's not actually a guess. I know that for a fact.
that's sad.
I've seen them made. It's terrible.
You have?
Oh, it's yeah.
I just think we should avoid watching those things so that we can like live in blissful denial.
Blissful denial. That might be part of what we're talking about today. Maybe. I don't know.
No.
People's blissful denial.
No, guess what?
What?
This is a podcast I've been looking forward to for so
I know.
freaking long.
Abby has literally been having a dialogue about this repeatedly for months on end. Like, I can't wait to get ... and have this happen.
Yes, I am so excited. I have our really good friend Megan is on the show today with us, and I'm so excited. I'm not introducing her
Now,
yet.
hold on a second. You don't just have a good friend, Megan. I also have a good friend, Megan.
You do.
She's one of our favorite people.
Yeah, do you have more to say?
No, you can keep going. I'll interject my fancy for her as we go along.
My fancy for her. She is amazing. She is so loving and kind and thoughtful, but she's one of the best communicators in talking through relational things that I've met. And I basically think she's like an online dating expert. She would not call herself that. I can see her. She's shaking her head no.
She's
She
smiling.
thinks that I'm ridiculous right now. But very few people. Okay, so dating right now is a whole new ball game than when me and you.
Yeah, I remember when we first started, we rode that horse carriage together. It was a real beautiful experience. The date that was set up by our parents.
You dork. Yeah. Well, dating
When I courted you. Dating has definitely evolved. Back when we dated, which makes us, like, I'm actually getting into that old space.
Oh, 100%.
When we started in our early 20s, that was an experience where you met through friends. There wasn't really any online encounter type deals, and you met through either going to a bar or some
or
sort
church.
of activity.
Those
or
were your
church
two
or something
options:
like that,
church
something
or a
like that.
bar.
And so that was a casual thing of how we ended up meeting, but I never had to go down the journey. I did have one friend at the time towards the end when we got married where online dating started opening up with eHarmony, and he ended up on that, and he actually got married through that.
Yeah.
And at first I was like, some weird stuff's going to happen here. Why are you doing this? Maybe the girls on here are stalkers. And that was always the early question about online dating. Who's the stalker and what's happening? And
that's funny.
Yeah. But culture is so evolved now from that, and I wouldn't even
Everyone's
know how to,
online dating.
I wouldn't know how to do the swipe up or swipe down or left or right.
No,
I wouldn't even
you'd
know.
be a dating idiot. Thank God you have a wife that's never going to leave
Megan
you.
shaking her head. Yes. We're about to let you in on this, Megan.
So Megan has been going on the journey of online dating, and she is so brilliant emotionally at how to relate and how to go through the process. And she's done the best job of keeping her heart open, but also having wisdom and going for the journey, but also not being an idiot. Like there's just she knows how to give her heart.
I've watched you
guys.
have girly squeal moments internally where a little bit where you're like, I'm a little excited, but you manage yourself really well.
Yeah.
Where other people just spiral into like, this is the one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So anyway, you've done this so well that I wanted every time we talk about dating, which is whenever we are connecting, I think I want the whole world to hear this because this is going to help so many people navigate. Now, if you are out there and you're married and you listen to our podcast, this might be helpful information for you, for your friends who are single. Also, Megan is so good at communication that if you are married, you'll probably learn just from her about things to do.
And I'm going to add this final thing.
Yes.
To it. Guys, listen up.
Yes.
Because first off, well, for the ladies, you're going to learn how to be real careful about how you deal with the guys. But guys, like, you're going to figure out some do's and don'ts in the journey of pursuing a woman, especially in online dating, and how to manage yourself. And
well, not even just in online dating. It's really about dating.
Dating in general. But you're going to learn how to actually be a man through the things that she actually dialogues about. Because some of the things that I think that you've experienced in dating, you've experienced boys in moments and boyish behavior and not actually man behavior. And so I love hearing from a woman what actually a man can look like.
Yeah. So welcome, Megan.
Thanks, guys.
We're so excited
to have
the
introduction.
Well, it's all very true.
Yeah.
So you, we're just going to jump in.
Yep.
Why don't you tell us why you decided to start dating online?
Well,
why you decided to start dating? Because I want to be with somebody.
Well, I mean, honestly, I think living here, I was not dating. Like, I wasn't meeting people. It didn't seem to be working. And I think you hear people like, oh, well, there's just no guys in Redding. And I'm like, who are, you know, not in their early 20s. And so you just start to be like, well, that can't be true. Like, there has to be something. And I felt very much like I was waiting for something to happen to me. And so, and didn't feel very powerful in this at all. It felt like once this person comes and finds me, or I just need to pray and I'm just waiting for that to happen. And I felt like I'm not being powerful at all in my life in this area, which I actually say is the thing that I want the most.
Right.
And so I'm like, I'm being really intentional everywhere else, but I'm actually taking no responsibility for my life in this area.
That's so good.
And so I was like,
that a kick in the gut when you realized that?
I knew it for a while, actually. I probably knew it for a good like year and a half.
So you're stewing on the reality of that?
Well, it was more because then I just got super in my head about like, but is that me taking control and not being trusting and not waiting for the situation? And then all of a sudden I'm like, no, it's actually just me being super passive and actually not owning this area of my life. And so, but I actually was like, I felt like resentful about having to do this when all my other friends haven't. And I just hit this point where I was like, you know, I don't actually want my story to be, I met some guy online, but I actually want a story.
Right.
And so if I want a story, I'm like, and then I'm like, also like, I haven't actually dated in a while. So I think I probably suck at it. And I probably need to like,
practice.
I need to learn how to date and do this and not make it all feel, everything felt overwhelming and scary. And so
I was going to say, did you feel terrified as you started the process?
It was horrible. Like writing a profile. Like, what do you say about yourself? Like, how much do you write?
I'm the best.
But like, how much do you say versus you're like, I don't write anything versus like, I write, like some people you like would start to read theirs. And I'm like, okay, well, now I know everything. And every bad relationship you ever had and everything you're scared of and your hangups. I'm like, swipe left. Like, and so it's like, what do you write? And what pictures do you choose? Because you're like, I want to make sure I look sporty, but I also need to make sure I love kids and I'm nice to my grandma. And so you're like, what are these things? But look, I'm cute and fun too. And I have friends. I'm not a loner.
And have
so you're trying to like all the thoughts of how do you actually create these and like what pictures do you choose? And oh my gosh.
So you had a lot of nerves.
Oh, everything for me in it felt so high stakes. Like the first time someone reached out to you, like, and you just have this gasp of like, do I respond? What do I respond? What do I say? It all like everything felt, because it was like there's no habits.
Right.
So like everything you had to think through, it felt emotionally hard. Like I'm like, you would do this for a little bit and I'm like, I feel emotionally wiped out. This feels so dumb.
I just responded to somebody who asked, and then you're like, how can I only
and it took me 10 minutes.
It was a couple of sentences.
But it
hey, how you doing?
Yeah, how you doing? And now you're like, oh, da 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 da. You can write them so fast, and like at this point, I'm like, everything cost me emotionally in the beginning because I didn't know how to do it.
Right.
And so now it's just like, oh, I don't know them. I don't know anything, and I was trying to like figure out right away. Like,
I need to know right away if I could be with you or what.
Well, I think I remember reading this book by Henry Cloud.
Dating for Dummies.
No, it's how to get a date worth keeping.
Oh,
and it's
that's
like,
cool.
And it
Good
says
name.
the
Henry
whole.
Cloud did that, huh?
Yeah, and so everyone says like they're trying to figure out, is this a person I want to marry? And he's like, you're just trying to figure out, is this a person I want to go on a date with?
That's
and then the next
so
question is this the
good.
person you want to go on another date with? So
That's a really good
it
way
makes
to approach it.
everything
You're breaking it down.
and not making it so high stakes.
Yes.
The whole process felt so high stakes. And so like the first time someone wants to meet you, you're like, what? And like, do you do, and
What do I
everyone's
wear? Where do I go?
well, and be safe and your friends. And you have 5 text us. Can we sit there and watch you
totally.
date? I'm like,
Are they going to
no.
murder you later? What's
Hey,
going to
listen,
happen?
I am
Yeah.
one of those friends, and
Yeah,
I feel
you
that
do.
way. I get nervous about like my friends online dating. I'm like, I will sit in that restaurant with a book and just peer
the
over to
background
make
watching.
sure you're okay.
So yeah, you just had to figure out how to start to do it. And like, I don't want to give my number. Oh my gosh, giving my number is the scariest thing ever. And now I'm like, oh yeah, you can totally have my number. Like if you get creepy and weird, I'll block you. Like versus before, I'm gonna make you talk to me for like a month. And like, I mean, it was just like everything felt hard and like all of these questions you need to have answered. And I want to know everything. And I'm like, that's just not actually how you get to meet someone. It's all virtual.
No.
They can make
Right.
up anything. So
It's, I like what you're saying because I think anytime anyone starts a new process in life, a new job, a new hobby, a new relationship, this is the same journey that you're talking about. Things feel really intense in the beginning because everything is taking all of your brain space, your emotional space. You're
That's
having to
real.
process lots of things.
Totally.
You don't have normals. You don't have routines. And so like I tell people, you don't even know if you like a job before 3 months because up until that point, you're just feeling stressed by what you don't know.
Totally.
Once you get into a routine of something, it's so much easier. So I like that because I have a lot of friends who try online dating for about a couple months. And they're like, this is too hard. It takes too much energy. And they don't actually hit to the point where they can like settle in and relax a little bit.
it took like 4 to 6 months to the stakes get lowered in my head. Even though I was like, no, I'm like talking myself through like, this is okay. This is what you do. But like, I would say for my emotions to catch up with what my head knew, it took about 4 to 6 months before I actually was like actually writing someone. And even like, before I'm like, they for sure could be a fit. And I'm like, I feel very neutral towards this person. I'm like, sure, I'll respond.
Yeah.
Like, who knows? And so like, and being way more open to a lot of options versus needing it to all make sense. But for that to actually not emotionally, those first reach outs to not cost me, it took a while.
Yeah. I think like that makes sense. So you talked about how in the beginning you were looking for everything to line up and then you kind of loosened up. Tell us about that journey.
Well, I think with like you kind of have that internal list almost of my faith is really important to me. I want someone who they don't have to have a college degree, but I want them to feel like they have ambition.
Yeah.
I want them to have a value for family. I want to know that they have a value for emotional health and working through their stuff. And like, I wanted before you met them, like
To know all of
I
those
want to know
things.
it all. And so,
You
and
mean
like,
know it all that they had it before you actually went on the date even.
before it even go on.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to have it all figured out versus I'm like, well, and my faith really matters. And so there's some specific expressions for me that
Of what that
happen. So
looks
like
like,
they
yeah.
need to know. So
Right.
then it's like, they're going to reject me because of that. They'll do it early on. So I actually don't really get hurt. And so I don't meet them and really like them and then get disappointed when that becomes a non-negotiable for them.
Right.
And so I wanted all of that to be, and now I'm like, just go to dinner with the person and get to know them, or go like even go to dinner. Like, let's meet for a juice. Let's meet for a coffee. Let's like, and do, like even like dinner sometimes like, ooh, that feels high stakes. Like, let's do a coffee on a Friday. Let's grab a juice on Saturday afternoon. So I actually stopped needing it to look like a date where like they're
That's
taking
really
me
good.
to a dinner and we're doing
Yeah.
this thing and it's
Yeah.
all so official. And I'm like, that actually, for me, those start to make it higher stakes.
I would feel trapped.
Yeah.
Like if I was in the dating pool now and I had to go on a full on date
Every
at a
time
dinner
with a
every
new
time I
person?
did it, I'd be like, this is going to be 2 to 3 hours for sure because we're going to talk, we're going to eat, we're going to do all that stuff instead of like, no, I just want
And some of them have been so bad. I'm like, praise God, because I'm like I actually did one in 25 minutes and I was just like,
Shut up. Tell us the story.
yeah, I have to know this 25-minute date.
it was bad. I mean, he okay.
Did you walk out on him?
No, I never.
She's amazing at this. This is why
I have never walked out. We were like when we met, he had just moved down here. He was and again, nothing wrong with this, but it was just multiple things. I'm just giving you like the snapshot. He had moved in with his ex-in-laws because he was homeless, it turned out, which I discovered, but to help raise his kids. He was the best restaurant he'd ever been to ever in his life, because he was from Alaska, was Jack in the Box, and it's so cool. And he was like endearing, but just where he was in his life and like what.
You're like, this is not matching my journey. My journey and your journey are two different journeys altogether.
Yeah, and like this makes me sound super superficial and that, but
no,
also,
it doesn't. Come on.
I mean,
come
on. When like what he was.
Let's say.
Okay.
Let's put it this way.
Okay.
Megan is a very proactive person inside of her life.
Owns
That's
her
moving
own
towards
business.
certain goals inside of her journey. So to me, I'm like, yes, I absolutely want someone who is on an equal journey with me. Doesn't make this person bad, but don't sit back and like even act like I sound like shallow for this. No, you don't.
Yeah. So I mean, I kind of like called it.
You
like,
knew we're not in the same
and normally
place
I
of
would
life.
like let it play out a little bit more. Gosh, what did he said something, and I remember being like, this just feels cruel. So I just like was like, hey, you just seem like such a kind man, and I love like what you're trying to do to like for your children.
Yeah.
I can just see. I just don't think we're gonna be a good fit. So I wish you the best. But he's like, yeah. That feels really real. So, like, it was mutual. Like we were both kind of like, wow,
this is not right.
Square peg, round hole.
Yeah, totally.
Nothing wrong with the square peg or the round hole, but they don't fit.
But
so.
see, this is what I like.
I do like how. Go ahead. You're gonna say what I was probably gonna say.
Yeah. You want to go ahead?
Well, I was gonna talk about your delivery of how you responded, and you didn't just get up and walk out and be like, goodbye.
I'm going to the bathroom
and leave
and
or
then
anything
never
like
show
that.
up.
It was actually a very powerful conversation and a kind way. It wasn't like you have no value as a human being because you didn't feel that way about him. You just were like, this isn't the fit. I can see it. I'm not going the same direction. I'm going to say it.
That was a nice one. I've had a couple where I'm like, it's not, because like you go on these dates and there's like, I like you. You like me. I'm not interested, or ooh, you are interested in. I am not, and so you're gonna have a mix of all of those things, or we both are like that one, like wow,
yeah, we both.
Did that now? Here's a quick question because I think that this is necessary to talk about. Did that feel terrifying to directly say that?
Not at that point, because I had been
for those whole 20 minutes you had been counting down.
Oh, and well, I mean, and at that point, I've like, as far as being like online dating, that's probably like 2 years into the journey.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so if it had been in the first, even probably year, I probably wouldn't have. I just would have been polite and smiled through it, and then like, thank you so much, and.
I would never want the polite smile through it. If someone decides, well,
I would have done that for sure.
No, totally.
I wouldn't have known how to handle it.
Most people would have, and they wouldn't have known how to do what you did in this case. But I know that when I was on a journey of house hunting, I jumped into the houses, and within probably a minute of walking around the house, I looked at the realtor and I go, not it. And I walked out, and he's like, are you sure I know what I want. I know what I don't want. And I would rather just have those experiences inside of dating where someone just would say to me,
you're not it.
Yeah, this isn't it. This isn't. Oh, great. I now have the next hour to go do fun things that I want to do.
Yeah. But half the time too, I think where I'm like, I feel neutral towards you. I didn't like you. Like, wow, there weren't initial sparks.
But I didn't hate you.
But I didn't just like, there was nothing that flagged me that said, wow, that's clearly not going to be a good fit. And so then it's not writing them off when you didn't feel the initial sparks, but like, I would go on another date with you.
Now, see, this is a very important thing. And I tell people this all the time. You can't always tell in the first, I would say first maybe 3. If they're in the neutral land, I say keep meeting with them. Because lots of times people are nervous their first few or don't know how to be themselves, or there's so many things that can play into it that you can end up discovering. And I have friends who, when they dated their spouse, they completely
did not like them.
Yeah.
Like they actually, I know a few people who are married who are like, I will never marry that person. Like that's a bad fit. And then I'm like, it evolved. And so I know those, but I'm like, I know those stories too. And so just because it's not immediate sparks doesn't mean you're not like a really good quality man.
Yeah.
And if I don't have any major like, wow, that's just obviously not going to be a fit. And if you're in, I'm like, I would go out, but then I'm like, maybe not dinner. Like, well, let's go for a walk. Like, I don't need to make it a me. Like, well, then the next one has to be a date.
Totally. Now, and the other reason, I'll just throw this in there, is sparks sometimes are like really good chemistry, and sometimes sparks are actually.
Yeah.
You're attracted. No, I mean,
but also sometimes sparks are your dysfunctions are magnetic with their dysfunctions. Mm-hmm. And so sparks are not always the best sign in the beginning. They're not always the worst either.
Or you can go,
I had genuine sparks with you, but I would say also our dysfunctions really
there's something for some people, they feel at home with another person. All of a sudden that spark is feeling at home because it's very familiar dysfunctions.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, you remind me of something. Oh yeah, I was a dysfunction with my dad.
So that's why I say like sparks for the first few dates are not the most important, the most reliable or the most credible way to decide if you should date.
For sure. They're definitely fun though.
But they are fun.
I mean,
they are fun. Yeah,
it is when you're like, when you can feel that back and forth. And I mean, that's a great feeling too.
Yes.
So you don't ignore it. You can't make that the only indicator that this might be something.
So let's talk about how you communicate. So you just mentioned there's several different kinds. So like you're both interested in each other, or you're interested and they're not, or they're interested and you're not. Tell us how you communicate through all of those kinds of options.
Communicate why?
Like, so let's say you in the date and you're interested. Mm-hmm. What do you then do?
Honestly, it depends. Like usually I would say it's that weird balance of like giving some space for pursuit, but also making sure it's clear you're interested.
Yeah.
And so I think that becomes an interesting space of like, how do you navigate that? And when you really like them, you're like, well, I just want to like talk to them tomorrow and like, let's have a conversation. And so,
because there's not official,
there's no rules.
There's no rules. There's some different cultures are like, you have to wait this many days before you say anything. Yeah. But I don't think there are rules, but there are things that you found.
Because sometimes I've gone out with someone who has my number, and sometimes I've gone out with people who don't have my number.
Yeah.
Like it's just only been through the app. And so I don't usually, like I used to I used to have almost like timelines of like, I will talk to them this long on the app, and then I will text them this long, and then we will have this many conversations, and then we can meet. And now like I literally had someone who's been like, you're texting like, hey, what are you doing tonight? Do you want to go grab coffee? And I'm like, you know what? Why not? And like, it has been literally like maybe 4 texts back and forth.
Right.
And I've been like, sure, it's at Starbucks. What's going to happen?
Totally.
So like I've had like, I feel like I needed the rules originally to make me feel safe, but now I don't need them anymore.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I needed the rules originally to make me feel safe, but now I don't need them anymore.
And that's the goal, is to feel safe through the whole process.
Right.
So let's say the guy is interested in you and you know that you're not interested. How would you communicate?
It depends. Sometimes I would say I'm a little soft-hearted. So to actually, one of the things I don't want to do, because I'm sure we'll talk about the whole ghosting thing, but I've had that where you're just like, what's going on?
Yes.
So I don't want to do that. And so if they're like, it depends on how the conversation, like I'm not going to like, I don't need to sometimes blatantly like, hey, just want you to understand, I don't want to go out again. And so I don't necessarily get like that. If they're like, hey, do you want to go out again? And sometimes I will say things like, see, and I also don't want to make conclusions at that point too, because I'm like, let's see what I'm thinking, because it wasn't it was neutral and it wasn't like red flag. I did have one red flag where we were like, he was so, do you remember that story I told you about that one guy? Sorry, I'm just remembering this, like it was my most aggressive ever
tell us about
dislike. We met for dinner, and he showed up and like just like looked like a bum. Like like wife beater, and I was just like
very unkept.
And I was kind of like
he didn't care about the whole date in the first place. Like he didn't care about how he presented
and
himself.
His whole conversation is about how horrible his ex is, how horrible his kids are, how much he hates Reading, how much he hates his job. And I'm like, the glass isn't half empty. There's nothing in the glass. And so then he, and I was just like,
oh, that'd feel disastrous.
And one of the ways I try to communicate too, I'm like, especially if I'm not interested, when they offer to pay, I'm like, oh, no, I have it. I'm happy to get mine. And so he's like, oh my gosh, I forgot my wallet. I'm going to run. And I'm like, I've got it. Seriously, no worries. And then he runs. He's like, I'll go get it. And I'm like, oh gosh, please let him not come back. That would actually be a gift. But he did. He's like, oh my gosh, I didn't have it in the car. I'm like, seriously, no worries. And then he like throws it on the table and like, ha ha, I was just kidding. I'm like, huh. And he's like, it's a joke. You're supposed to laugh. And I was just like, if it had been funny, I would have laughed. Like, I was so annoyed, like, because he's like, you need to loosen up. You're so uncomfortable. He's like, let me take you to another place. Let's go to this place. Let's go to Whiskey Town. I'm like, no, that doesn't actually work. And I kept saying like lots of no's. I don't want to do this.
No and was an invitation for yes.
Yes.
Apparently in his head.
And so I ended up getting
no means no.
No, I got a text from him saying like, you're never going to meet anybody if you're going to be that emotionally frigid and closed off.
Oh my gosh.
And I was upset because I had told him, I'm like, well.
Did you say, well, you're never going to meet anyone if you don't get a life?
Well, I just communicated. I'm like, hey, the level of negative communication that I experience isn't something that would be okay. And he's like, well, good luck. Funny thing was, like 6 months later, he actually texted me in one of those apps again and apologized for his bad behavior.
No, he did not.
He did, which was actually really impressive.
That's amazing.
I was actually impressed with that.
And what I like is that you won't engage in name calling or aggression.
No.
You'll stay firm and polite though inside of it, which actually calls someone to a higher standard.
Yeah.
I think that you calling him out like that and just being direct made him have to actually
Well, and
he's
I can't remember. He said something very rude back, and I just wrote back and said, hey, I'm actually going to be blocking your number because I don't want to engage in a conversation with you anymore. I wish you the best. And like blocked it. Yeah. So I told him I was doing it and then blocked it.
Love it.
So
that's awesome.
That's
Take
so
notes,
great.
people. That's
Take
the way to be a
notes.
friggin' adult.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say
I keep not asking answering your question about and it's about if I don't like them. So sometimes I will like I'll not engage. Like, thank you so much. It was so wonderful to meet you. You know, hope you have a great evening. And
communicating, that's good.
Yeah. And then, but often I'm like, I make a point though, if they have a number and they ask me, I'm like, hey, I just honestly don't feel like it's a good fit. You seem like, especially most of them are like, they're great guys. They're just not good fits. And so I make a point to like at least verbally or written communicate it.
Yep.
Sometimes I'll do it face to face. Honestly, it is hard, especially, and it's the thing of like, how much emotional responsibility do I have? It's one coffee. It's not like, I'm like, it's not like, so I don't like and I've had people like, oh my gosh, how can you do this? And I'm like, you're not giving me a chance. And I'm like, totally. I understand that's your perspective. I feel
so they get overrun with their own shame, rejection issues.
Because I'm so amazing. They just don't know how to handle it.
So true.
I'm awesome.
Yes. So, I mean, but that happens rarely.
Yeah.
Okay.
That as a side note, I got to imagine that's got to be one of the most difficult parts of dating for a lot of people is that moment.
Saying no.
Well, saying no, especially when someone keeps coming back and having hurt feelings, and have you? So that would tell me that have you gotten okay with people having hurt feelings, their own rejection, and their own shame, or where are you at with that?
Think so. But part of it for me is that's part. Like I think where it used to feel higher. One of the things I did was it was so high stakes, so everything felt scary, and so now I feel like that's the thing where I haven't spent like a month. Like at that point, what do they say? 10% of communication is actually verbal. The rest is all nonverbal. So through texting, I'm making up a person and a story in my head about who they are.
So true.
Because we're designed to make up stories.
Yes.
Like that's actually the way our brain is wired.
Yeah.
They're doing the same thing about me if they're actually someone who is truly looking to meet
date.
someone. And so if we spend all of this virtual time, we have made up a person.
Right.
Versus if we meet pretty quickly, then all of a sudden I haven't had time to make up who this person is. And they haven't had time to make up who I am. So all of a sudden, like I could be super disappointed or they could, but it's because I'm disappointed about the person in my head that they are, not who they actually
Such a great point.
Yes. It's
Huge
so true.
Point.
And I actually think people just naturally fantasize. They make up who humans are.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I knew that about my personality. And so I had to learn the skill.
Probably helped you that in your fantasy, I was better than it. Huh?
Baby, you're pure magic. Pure magic. So I actually had to learn the skill of being able to imagine people's shortcomings. So as soon as I started fantasizing about a guy, fantasizing is in like making up what they were like. Because here's how it goes. you see a picture with them with kids and you make up that they love kids.
They must love kids. And then he shows
They
up in
must
a
be
wife
so
beater
great
and
with
says,
kids.
I really hate my children.
Yes.
They're terrible. But you were smiling so big with those kids. Those weren't even my kids.
Right. So I've taught myself, and I've actually done this with clients before. I'll have them, like I had one of my clients go watch, what's that show with Schmidt?
On a date with Todd Hamilton.
No. And Jess and the
New
three,
Girl.
New Girl. Thank
Uh-huh.
you. Sorry, I couldn't remember. I just kept hearing, who's that girl? It's Jess. But so I made him watch it, and because he loved that girl character, and I was like, I need you to actually figure out some of the flaws and things that would be hard in dating her, because you've just made an idol of what she would be like. And so he had to actually think about that.
You
And now,
realized she was a
some
train
people
wreck,
out
didn't
there are real critical, and they do not need to figure that out. They need to figure out how to see the good. But it's kind of knowing your tendency.
Right.
What do I do, and what do I bring to the table, and how do I? So if I really get lost in fantasy, I need to meet people sooner than doing 4 weeks of online communication.
For sure.
Totally.
Yeah. Okay, so you did mention that like some men aren't in it for a real relationship.
Not at all.
What are they in it
How
for,
did you
Holly?
find that out, and what is that?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a couple things.
Uh-huh.
There's I think there's the balance of, I found some people who I'm like, well, they will take your number to text for sure. But then like, do you want to have a conversation, and it keeps not happening, or do you want to meet up? And their things just keep popping up. And the reason they can't. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, you want to get a lot of emotional needs met and have it cost you nothing.
Via text
Right.
messages.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
Because
that's
all
good.
the-
I'm bored. And I have someone
have
to talk
somebody
to. who's
to-
being nice.
And they start talking to you about, oh my gosh, you're like everything I've dreamed of. And oh my gosh, you're the type of person I want to end up with. And oh, can you imagine the life? And can you imagine these vacations? And can you imagine what we'll do? And I'm like, everything is about this pretend life that we don't have.
Right.
And so all of a sudden, or even in phone calls, they'll do that too. Like we're like, oh, you're just everything I've always wanted in dream. And like all of a sudden, like I'm totally words of affirmation girl. So the first time that starts to happen, you're like, oh my gosh, I feel so seen. You're seeing everything. We're like, you want a family, you want to do this, you want to travel, you love this. Like, oh my gosh, you have ambition and you're growing here. And I'm like, I don't actually know that any of that is true yet.
Right.
You're just presenting something to me. And so I discovered like they just keep coming back. And it's kind of funny. There was someone last year who it kept just not working. And then I was like, I'm going to call it. And then he and he reached out to me again. And I was like, hey, if you are actually ready to meet someone, great.
Yeah.
Like, but if you're not, like, I'm not interested. He's like, no. And so I actually texted him yesterday because I was like, hey, I know I think you want to be in a relationship, but you are not willing to do the work to be in a relationship.
Right.
So I think we need to just say, I wish you the best.
Yeah.
But I'm not interested in doing this again.
That's
That's
great.
very boss of you.
So
I know you're so good at this.
Thanks. So.
Okay, so but I remember the first time you got scammed.
Oh, totally.
Tell us
Guys,
that story.
it happens.
So that, and let's give some people some signs so that they
for
can
sure.
avoid it. Yeah.
There are definitely now, because there's a ton of people out there, and I'm like, oh, I can find it
like
in
a mile away.
Oh yeah, like literally, I'm like, there's a few. I'll tell you the story, and then I'll tell you some of the the likelihoods that like this person is a scam. He was this widower. And who has a child. Oh, be still my heart. He didn't choose to like lose someone. He was forced to lose someone, and he loves his child and just trying to make a go of it, but has a very successful job where he travels overseas. Dang it. It feels so obvious now, but at the time, but he wasn't traveling when we first started talking. He wrote very long texts, like very long. I'm like, you don't know. And now in my head, I'm like, you don't know jack about me. But he could see who I was through my very small profile and pictures and the goodness in my heart and what amazing mother I would be and all these things. And so we started talking. But then he had to go overseas. And then all of a sudden,
to his other family.
Probably. And then all of a sudden the trip started going really poorly. And all of a sudden, like and I was just like, oh yeah, we're trying to figure this out. And we probably had talked 2 weeks. So it wasn't like I wasn't months into this, but all of a sudden, like, and when the trip started going poorly, I think I was just like, like
Trip started going poorly,
like financially this thing, and he's trying to work it out. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
He worked you that long to try and get some money out of you?
2 weeks?
Yeah. So like, and I've heard some crazy stories of what people do. And I mean, obviously I'm like, I didn't FaceTime this guy. I'm like all about, FaceTime the person or whatever, because I'm like, are you the face behind the pictures?
Yes.
And I was like, and I started like, I want to FaceTime you. Yeah. I want to see you.
How do you respond to that?
He's like, oh, there's such a bad signal here. And I'm just like,
right.
Bull. And so I was, and he actually did ask. And I was just like, I'm like, I have zero responsibility for your finding. I was like, I know what's happening. Like I'm 95% sure now, and I'm just pissed.
Right.
And I'm like, you have family, you have colleagues. Like I don't have responsibility for, I'm like, I'm so sorry you're in the situation, but I am not going to feel responsible. And like the guilt, like, and then he was like, oh, you don't even understand what's going to happen. And I'm like,
oh my gosh.
And I was just like, oh my gosh, how did I actually
get sucked in?
Because like he was so good with words.
Oh,
like very good.
And that's probably all he does all day.
Probably. And
People
so like,
just
I mean, I
woos
felt
people
so
to get money.
seen and valued, and like every like would talk about the house we're going to like, which I was like, wow, this feels very fast. And I would often say like, man, that feels fast. Like let's meet, buddy. Yeah. But I'm like, all of a sudden, like it's so easy when this is the thing you want, and then you can just go live in his pretend world that he's making up.
Yeah,
even if he's not a catfish, but even if he's just someone who's like wanting emotional needs met.
Yeah.
But it's really easy to go walk down the virtual world that they're creating for us.
Yeah.
That actually will never be.
Want so much.
Totally.
Absolutely.
I'm sure that happens a lot.
So what would you say, what are the red flags that you know now?
I would say they use very formal language. You're for sure going to see spelling mistakes. Often they're in the military now. So sorry, military men that actually are real. But if you're overseas, I don't believe you for a second.
Totally.
So now they're like, I'm like, I would say they usually are a widower or they have a child that they're raising on their own because the mom abandoned them.
Right.
And so, especially for, I think once you hit like that group that's 30s plus,
yep.
where like, a lot of people are wanting to step into that area of their life. And so, but yeah, and they emotionally engage so quick. The things that they value and see about you are so intense, so quickly.
If they think you're awesome and haven't met you in person, run. Yeah. You shouldn't think I'm awesome this fast. You shouldn't. You shouldn't have decided.
You should think I'm medium awesome.
You shouldn't think I'm the most amazing person on the face
I
of
actually
the
am
planet.
okay. I would disagree. I think they can think you're awesome. They can't know what your life's going to look like. They can't know the type of they know things about you and the way they communicate.
Sure. Well, they can't already think that you're going to have an amazing life. The minute if somebody ever online without me dating them in person said like I could so see us together, goodbye.
Yeah.
That's insane.
True.
Even if you're not a catfish,
Yeah.
you're insane that you've gone that far down the road in your head without actually meeting me, because you are living in relationship with the fantasy.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Even if you're not
catfish or emotionally unavailable,
right.
like our Mr. Darcy's. So
right. And so a lot of guys are actually on there either like catfishing, which is what that person was doing.
Yeah. I don't experience that a ton, but I'm like, oh, you see it coming.
You know how to recognize.
And their pictures, I'm like, these people are abnormally good looking.
Right.
Like,
totally.
like, wow. So.
Yes. Or the other reason is they just want to get their emotional needs met, but they don't want to actually pay the price to date.
Totally.
So it's just kind of like a hobby.
Right.
Something to feed their ego and keep them occupied.
Which
is very lonely for them.
Oh, I think it's super lonely.
That's really sad.
Yeah, a lot of false intimacy inside of that for them.
Yeah.
That'd be really painful. Is there another thing that they're out for?
Oh, you mean just wanting sex?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure. A lot of them want to just like, I think that becomes something where they want to start sending you videos or sending you having conversations, and it just inches a little bit where like it's a slight inappropriateness of where they go, but it typically goes down the road real quick. Or
have you ever had anyone hit you like with something that was pretty explicit out of nowhere, and you're like, why do you think women would even be attracted to this picture?
Oh, for sure. So many, but
guys are crazy to me.
Like what happened?
Like I remember, I mean, I don't know how many times I have been propositioned for a threesome, and I'm just like. And I remember when it first happened, it was very early on. And it felt like I had this choice because I was so offended. I'm like, oh, that's all these people want. I'm not doing this anymore.
Yes.
And I actually felt like
to judge all men.
and I actually felt like I was like,
process.
well, I felt like I was praying about it. And I actually felt like the Lord said, you're being so judgmental. And I was like, hello? Like, what do you mean?
Worst thing ever.
I know, like how, and he's just like, you can just delete it. Like, why are you letting offense actually control you that much?
About their world, their life,
About their
how
world.
they're
Like,
approaching
it says
you.
nothing about me.
Yeah.
Right.
It says everything about them. And so I was like, oh, wow, I'm looking, it was when it was early and felt high stakes. Like, you're looking for a reason to not be powerful here. Like, don't actually
because
engage
you
with
were
the
like
reason.
wanting to bounce out because
Oh,
of
for
that.
sure. Because
Yeah.
it felt hard and scary and emotional and vulnerable and all the things where that didn't feel fun.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's actually talk about the area of sex because I think this is, especially I'm around a lot of people who don't feel comfortable, like they don't want to be having sex when they meet somebody and dating right away.
For sure.
And that is complicated when you're dating people and you don't know what their core values are. So tell us how your journey in communicating with that started in the beginning and where you've kind of landed now and how you approach that subject.
Yeah. Well, I think, and before, I used to want to like know where they were in their faith because my faith is a big deal to me and have it all figured out. So then I could make sure I don't waste their time or my time.
Yeah.
But then it made it, oh my gosh, this could be the person versus
Right.
like,
oh, every time they did have faith, you're like, ooh, this
wow.
is right.
yeah. And like once you checked all the boxes and all of a sudden it made it higher stakes. So
Yes.
I think
so
now
then disappointment would be harder.
way harder. But so when I started with this, now I think I'm like, I'm just going out to like hang out. That's all. Like, is there even any connection? And so with that conversation, I would say sometimes it pops up. I usually tell people in the conversation, and it depends. Sometimes it happens before we meet. Sometimes it happens on a first hangout. Sometimes it happens on the third or fourth. Like it just actually, I don't have a rule of like, you must know this about me at this point, because then I want to make sure that I've given myself the emotional out so I don't get too involved.
Right.
But my language around it is, I'm like, hey, like my faith is actually a big deal to me. And one of the ways that it's expressed, which isn't as common in today's society, but like sex is a big deal to me. I haven't had that since before my faith became a big deal. It's been a lot of years. And so I would just want you to know that. I know for some people that is a non-negotiable in relationships and getting to know people. And so if that for you in the early stages is, I just want you to know, I totally get it. And if it's non-negotiable, like that's not a problem. Like not going to be upset, but that's also where I'm at in my boundary.
I love it. So you're clearly communicating your needs and you're communicating what you want and saying it's okay if this is not where you are.
Right. I'm like, I don't need to make, like, there's no like shame of like, well, you're doing it wrong because my faith says this. So
Right.
therefore what you're doing.
Right.
But I also understand, like, and I've had a couple people who I'm like, oh, I'm interested. And they're like, there's just no way
That I could
that
do that.
I have any interest in getting to know someone without that. And I'm like, totally respect that.
Yep.
And so like, I'm like, I actually was pretty interested. I'm like, oh, like you're fun, you're interesting, you're adventurous, like all the things. And I'm like, yeah, I totally get it.
And I like that you, in you feeling the interest in some of those guys, and then those guys saying, hey, that's a deal breaker for me because of my value system, that it didn't cause you to violate your own value system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where you weren't like, oh, this may never come along again. I feel interested in this.
Yeah.
It didn't become something that pulled you and strung
don't think you
along.
don't, like you definitely are like emotionally like, oh, what am I choosing? What am I choosing? Like it's not like it's like it doesn't challenge you to have to figure stuff out, and it like pushes you there. But like it is something, the reality of if like, because I am a Christian and that matters to me, and I'm like, so far I'm like, meeting someone in the church has not been a place I've been successful.
Yeah.
Other people have. But
Right.
if like I'm going to choose to do this, then I need to know like they might be in a different, and I've had certain people like, don't bring it up for a long time because you want to hook them. And I was like, well, I don't know that I want to hook them, but they're like, make that like, you're going to, if this matters to you, that's a cost
Right.
for them. And if you guys are actually going somewhere, and like help them see that the cost is worth it. So you don't need to
Yes.
make it known immediately.
Right.
And I'm like, I see your logic, and like I don't, again, it's not, I loved the formulaic rules in the beginning because they made me feel safe and powerful, but now they actually feel restrictive. And so I don't need them. So now I just kind of like let's just see how this relationship is going and navigate it and talk to each other.
And so you've had some guys be like, I can't do that.
Totally.
Have you had some guys be like, okay.
Yeah. No, I mean.
Can I interrupt that? Because I don't want to hold on to that for 1 second. One of the things I just want to interject is I think going into the dating process, what's key is knowing foundational value systems that you do have. There doesn't have to be a million things.
For sure.
But definitely like, no, these are non-negotiables for me at the core of me that irregardless of how they may respond or react or how attracted I am, I'm just not going to do that because I know that at the end of the day, I'll feel like I've violated myself by crossing that. And it doesn't even have to be on a sexual issue. It could be on other stuff, but you just have to know where that's at.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think you have a lot of, yourself. I think these are some of the reasons that have helped you navigate this. You know yourself, you know your core values, and you're not doing this with desperation.
Yeah.
So you're able to say no.
Some seasons you are. Like I would say like there has been emotional times where I'm like, I feel like, oh, I'm being super controlling by doing this. And I've had to take a break because I'm like, oh, I am feeling this. I actually don't feel like I can't online date right now in a good headspace.
Because you feel desperate inside.
Yeah. Like I'm like, this hasn't happened yet. And I'm waiting and I'm doing all the work and why hasn't it? And like, and that's okay to have that feeling. But then there's like almost a hopeless part. Like, why hasn't it happened? And if it lasts long enough, like if you have that thought for a day or two, like whatever, that's just life. Yeah. But if you can like feel that thing, like there's been a few times where I'm like, I need to take a little bit of a break because I'm not actually approaching it from a healthy mindset.
Yes.
And so sometimes I think it's not like people like just stick in the game and keep pushing through. And I'm like, oh, I'm actually violating myself right now. Like I'm actually being controlling and like it's actually the opposite of vulnerability right now because I'm trying to control it rather than give it space.
Right. Well, and the thing, again, going back to what Abby said, is that you know yourself really well. And that was the foundation. You have enough self-awareness, you're tracking enough that you can know when those moments of desperation have started surfacing that you're like, oh, check engine light.
Yeah.
All right, I need to adjust. And that's a big deal.
And usually you bring community in that because I think it's really easy when you are online dating to like, if it's, I don't want people to know, I don't want to have another one that didn't work or didn't happen. And I don't know, like, so it's an interesting balance of like when that's happening.
Did you feel shame in the beginning with
for sure.
your community?
It just felt, I felt exposed because of like, oh, another one that didn't work. Oh, another one that I had hoped for, and it's still not happening. And so it feels like a commentary on almost like you can like, why is this not happening? And I like before I started online dating, like I asked all my friends, like, do you see something in me that I actively need to work on? And do I have a big FU on my forehead that's saying men stay away? And so I asked specifically men, not women, because I'm like, they're like, we love you, you're the best. And I'm like, oh, thank you. I'm not looking for validation. I'm looking
for a reality check so I can
do I have blind spots?
Yeah.
And so I was intentional to like check in. And then even like I had a couple like brand new friends who like they didn't know me well because then I'm like, oh, you know me. And so like when I'd say like, hey, ask your husband, like, what does he think?
Right.
Like when they see me or experience me, like how do I feel approachable? Because I'm like, oh, if I have that and I'm not working on some stuff or I have a clear emotional like, wow, that's a big thing that's going to never let you have a healthy relationship, not a relationship, then I'm like, let's work on it.
Totally.
Well, as a side note, that takes some great ego strength on your behalf.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't have the ego strength to sit down and go, I'm going to get feedback because they have too deep of a relationship with shame or insecurity to be able to honestly or to hear the honesty that's going to come back to them. And a lot of people will feel that when a person doesn't have the ego strength, and they'll even withhold information because they feel it and be like, no, it's great. And so you want to be able to show up with that ego strength and be able to be like, no, I'm confident. And just,
well, then you don't want to keep bringing people in like, oh, I think, nope, not again. Oh, and like, it's just, I'm like, sometimes you can feel like, I don't want to take people on this until I know for sure. So then you're trying to figure out, when you actually, because, I've had a few relationships and like dated for a few months, and you want to like, you're trying to like, should I try to figure out a bunch before I bring them in? But then all of a sudden I'm potentially so emotionally, my fear was, and I watched other people do this. So it was one of the things I wanted to watch. Like, I don't want to get so emotionally need this person to be the one that my friendships have no ability to speak into it because I need you to agree with me more than I need you to actually be like protecting, fighting for me.
Yeah. So good. When you asked those questions, was it hard to ask, and was it hard to hear what people said?
It wasn't hard to ask because I didn't ask the world. Like, I'm like, I'm not looking for everyone a stranger's insight.
You didn't put it out on social media.
Yeah. I'm not trying to make sure that like everyone has, like, I don't want everyone to have a voice. Like, do I trust you? Do I think you're a healthy person? Like, where are you in my life? And those are the people who actually who I asked them to speak into it, and also told them like, hey, if you see me doing unhealthy choices when I'm dating, I want you to know, I want you to speak into it and call me on it before I even have a person. And so, and the feedback for me was like, no, we think you're going after, like, we see you consistently, you're going after emotional health, you're investing there. The one thing which I would hear is like, sometimes like you feel very accomplished and like what, and so like a lot of guys are not going to be interested in that because, and I'm like, well, that feels so stupid. Like, I'm like, how? And they're like, no, but like some people want, some people like that, but there's a good number of people who
are intimidated by that.
That could be. And I was just like, and I remember getting into a disagreement with someone, and they're just like, and I remember saying, well, I guess I'm going to have to manage that. And they got so mad, and they're like, don't you, we had some choice words, think about managing that. And I was like, I mean, manage that reality that I am cutting away opportunities, but they're like, that's not the person you want anyway. I'm like, totally. I mean, kind of like some of them are like, oh, in theory, they feel right, but like, well, you'll never get to actually be you. And so,
that's true.
Yeah. So that was the navigating, that aspect of getting to know someone.
Justin, I want you to actually talk about this idea of women being intimidating, because there's a lot of women out there who are listening who've probably been told that before. Yeah. And
you mean that they're kind of intimidating because they're powerful or they're
successful
in some way, shape, or form?
No, I'm not talking about, there's so many different ways that people are women can say you're intimidating when really that just means you're bitchy, or you're hardened, or you are edgy, snooty, or edgy, or there's a lot of intimidation. We're specifically talking about like, because she's ambitious and accomplished.
Well, to me, I absolutely believe that a man who's an actual man and not a boy loves the idea of that. Yeah. Because a man has entered into his own personal power. He loves the ability to be strong and capable in his own right. And he loves the confidence that he carries. Because when we actually enter into manhood, a manifestation of manhood is a confidence that's come up inside of us. And so we're actually looking for someone, a woman, an actual woman who has her own confidence that she's built inside of her own heart through different avenues, through what she believes to be true about herself, and even the things that she does in her life. And so to me, personally, if Abby wasn't in my world and I was off in the dating scene, I would be looking at this point, I need a woman who can show up next to me and run this race strong with me. But that's because I'm not a boy. And I can happily declare that.
Well, and I have, like, just to clarify, like, I have experienced what I said, but I have totally experienced guys who are absolutely like, this isn't like, it's so hard, guys. It's so hopeless. Like, not at all. Like, I've actually I've dated and had good relationships and had people who are like, I love like that you have this. I love that you have a business. I love that you're doing this stuff. Like, and so they're absolutely, that's out there.
Well, I haven't seen that as your experience. You were just mentioning that's what they said in the beginning.
Yeah.
I want to add this to it as well.
But I wanted to hit the people listening. Like, that's not a real thing. There are men who are attracted to.
Absolutely. Yeah. And who are really looking for relationships and really trying to find someone too.
Yes.
This is not a like, oh my gosh, poor women. They're out there and you're just trying to escape from then just find that one good guy. Like there's tons of guys out there.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're kind of like the pitfalls, but there's tons of great guys out there who they're looking for a relationship and they're looking to meet someone. And like really, like I've experienced a ton of great guys.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I wanted to add this because with regards to men, there's some men that have actually embraced their masculinity. I mean, they're in the man space, not the boy space. And there's parts of their life where they haven't, maybe they don't have a business and maybe they have a different job and stuff like that, but they have confidence in their arena and they just love that you have confidence and you're doing what you're doing. And they don't even necessarily have to match you in the same space of they own a business too and they're doing these things, but their heart is in a posture of success and they exist. There's a lot of them out there that do exist.
For sure.
Yeah.
And even like I would say like, because like, and this is like just bumping off the confidence. Because for me, that was one of the things where I'd say when I first started dating, like I feel like the responses I got were more neutral, but I've gained so much confidence in myself in this process. And like, oh, I think I look really good and I feel good. And like, I have something to offer. And like, you're just like, you get to continually see that. And so I would say now, like when I go out, like, I'm way more like, they're way more likely going, and I've learned how to date. I have literally learned how do you date and how do you like someone and how do you flirt with someone and how do you show interest.
Flirting is a skill.
It is not an obvious skill. Like you can be real awkward in it at first. And so like now I'm like, they're not in a like, cause I'm trying to win them, but I'm like, I'm just very at ease now being myself there and not trying to be like, what do you think they want? I'm like, I literally don't care. Like, right.
I'm me, I'm here.
And so that is like, and the same thing when I experience that with someone, whether I'm like fully physical, I'm like, you become very attracted to that and vice versa. So like, I'm like, oh, that just starts to happen because you just gain confidence in yourself.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. So Megan, I still have so many questions, things that we want to talk about. And so we are going to break this into 2 episodes. In our next episode, we're going to talk about like how to respond to ghosting and how to risk in dating and be vulnerable, but also how to be wise about protecting yourself and more of the heart process journey you've gone on. I love that you said that you have become more confident through this and more powerful. Yeah. I try to tell people like dating is meant to be something that you are learning about yourself. You're learning how to relate to others. I've heard you've had so many good, hard conversations. You've had to learn how to have a voice in a really great way. Like I think your relationship just with men in general is so much better just from how you've grown in practicing it.
Oh, for sure.
You had great relationships with men before. It wasn't like a problem.
Single men though.
Yeah. But now it feels very honed in. And so I just want to encourage people out there, like this hasn't been an area where you have become traumatized and defeated. It's an area where you have become empowered. And that doesn't mean it's been easy. And we'll talk kind of about the ups and downs in next week's episode. But if you were listening to this and you know somebody who's going on the journey of dating, whether it's online or not, just share it with people that you think that it could help. We want people to be empowered, to have tools of what to say and how to hold confidence and know who they are in the process. Dating can be so messy.
And know that they're not alone.
Yeah.
Because it's very easy to feel, I would say, alone out in the dating world, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You can very much. I think if you don't set up like some good people around you and before you actually start dating, like you could get yourself really isolated because you want to have it all figured out before you bring people into your community. And so I think that can be, and like there's going to be a lot of like, no again. And so that can be hard at times, like depending on where you're at. So it can feel isolating. That's
good. So send them a copy of this episode. Tell them to go listen to it. And as a side note, if you got anything out of this, as we always say, rate, review, subscribe, and share on social media. Tag us in it. Let us know how you're affected by it. We love getting to hear the feedback.
Yeah.
And
see you next week
with Megan next week.
Dun, dun, dun.
Goodbye.